Have you ever lived under the same roof with the people you love, and yet felt as if you had vanished from their world? She had. Tara Jensen. She lived 31 days like that. No words, no glances. Her husband and daughter united in silence until she understood she no longer existed in that house. On the morning of the 31st day, Tara poured herself a cup of coffee, slipped off her wedding ring, and set it on the table, and walked out the door without a word. No one followed, no one called her name, but that was the moment she truly began to live. This is the story of Tara Jensen, the woman who walked away. A story of silence, pain, forgiveness, and the journey of finding oneself again in the rainy city of Seattle. If you've ever felt small, invisible, or forgotten, then stay a while, because this story might just be yours someday. Seattle in October. The rain had begun, not fierce or wild, but steady, soft, and unending like a habit. Rain tapping on wooden window frames made the whole house breathe in, slow, cold, empty sighs. Tara Jensen woke at 5:30. She was used to rising early, brewing coffee for Neil, her husband, and preparing breakfast for their daughter, Zinnia. Everything unfolded as usual, except for one thing. For the past 30 days, no one had spoken a single word to her. She still cooked, cleaned, and polished the floors until they shone, but the small thank you she once heard every morning had vanished. Neil came downstairs, tie perfectly straight, glanced her way as if she were air. Zinnia, 18, sat at the table, eyes fixed on her phone, eating silently. At first, Tara thought they might be upset with her. She asked, "Did I do something wrong, Neil?" No reply, only the sound of a spoon tapping a plate. She turned to her daughter. "Zinnia, sweetheart, are you upset about something?" Zinnia didn't look up. She stood, grabbed her backpack, and walked straight out. The soft click of the door sounded colder than any shout. Tara sat still, staring at the empty chair, fingers tightening around a cup of coffee. The first day, she was confused. The second, she cried. By the 5th, she left a small note on the fridge. "Can we talk?" On the 6th, it was gone. Someone had taken it down deliberately, and that was all the answer she needed. Seattle was grey every afternoon. Their house, tucked into a corner of magnolia overlooking the harbor, caught the dim shimmer of ships through fog. Every evening, Tara still made dinner, set the table, and waited. They ate together, under the same light, but words had disappeared. One night, Neil was on the phone in the living room, his voice calm, measured. When Tara came in to bring him tea, he stopped mid-sentence. "Can you give me a minute?" "I'm busy," he said, without meeting her eyes. The words struck her heart, not for what they meant, but because they were the first ones he had spoken in days, and they were meant to push her away. She stepped out quietly, listening as his low laugh followed her down the hall, familiar once, now cruel. On the 12th day, she stopped cooking to see if they'd notice. That night, Neil ordered pizza. Zinnia giggled beside him. No one asked why dinner wasn't home-cooked. Tara stepped onto the balcony, watching the rain fall. Streetlights shimmered in puddles like the eyes of a woman seeing herself for the first time lost, estranged. She once believed marriage meant facing imperfection together. But now, their silence wasn't anger, it was punishment, a way to erase her without ever raising a voice. On the 18th day, Tara woke in the middle of the night, heart racing. She had dreamt of screaming, but no one heard. She walked through the house, opening doors, each room still, too still. In Zinnia's room, the glow from her phone lit her face light that no longer belonged to her mother. At that moment, Tara knew her family was surrounding her, yet she was lonelier than ever. The next morning, as she washed dishes, she heard Neil speaking softly to Zinnia in the kitchen. "Don't forget your jacket, it's cold out." She froze. Soap spilled over the rim of a bowl. It was the first time she'd heard his voice in weeks, but it wasn't for her. The sound, instead of comforting her, pressed against her chest until she couldn't breathe. She stood there, silent, tears slipping into the suds. By the 27th day, she barely recognized herself in the mirror, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, tangled hair. She laughed once, a broken, breathless sound. "You've won, Neil," she whispered. "You've turned me into air." But beneath that laugh came a pause, and in that pause she thought for the first time about leaving. On the 31st morning, the rain came harder than usual, pounding the roof as if trying to speak the words no one else dared. Tara rose earlier than needed, not out of duty, but because she couldn't sleep. She looked around the room, everything neat, spotless, lifeless, as though no one truly lived there. She pulled out her mother's old sweater and slipped it on. Then, by habit, I made coffee. Only 1 cup this time. When Neil came down, his eyes flicked to the table. 1 cup, she said softly. Yours is on the counter. He didn't answer. Tara studied him for a long time. That face, once the one she loved most, had become a wall. I just want to know how long you plan to stay silent. No reply. Only the wind sighs through the doorframe. She took a deep breath, set her cup down, and turned away. Inside, a voice whispered, "Enough." At noon, Zinnia came home, removed her shoes, and walked past without a word. Tara looked at her, those eyes, so much like Neil's, cold, proud, unwilling to admit fault. She went to her room, opened the closet, and began to fold her clothes. Each fold felt like closing a door to her old self. She opened a small box, her wedding ring, a birthday card, a photo of the 3 of them on their first trip to Oregon, relics of a woman already dead in their minds. She slipped off the ring and placed it on the kitchen table, where Neil usually Saturday. It glimmered faintly in the light, like a tear she no longer had the strength to shed. She looked around one last time, took only a small bag, a few clothes, an old photo of her mother, and a blank notebook. Before opening the door, she returned to the house once filled with laughter, now echoing with rain, and she stepped outside. No voice called her name. No footsteps followed. No one asked where she was going. The Magnolia streets were empty, carpeted with fallen leaves. Seattle kept raining, but Tara didn't open an umbrella. The rain hit her face, cold, sharp, but she felt light. She strolled. Each step is a letting go. Each drop, a cleansing. Behind her, the house blurred into mist. Ahead, the city opened up gray, loud, uncertain, but real. She stopped beneath a streetlight, looked up at the heavy, clouded sky, and smiled a small, tired, honest smile. "No one hears me," she whispered, "but at least I still have a voice." The rain kept falling, and Tara Jensen, the woman erased from her own life, finally walked away. Quietly, but completely. That day's Seattle rain fell endlessly, as if it wanted to hold Tara back. But she didn't stop. Magnolia Road was wrapped in a thin mist. Cars lined the curb, raindrops dripping from rooftops in slow, steady rhythms. She pulled her coat tighter, fingers gripping the strap of her canvas bag. No one looked at her. No one knew she had just left an entire life behind. She walked to the bus stop, her canvas shoes soaked through. Sitting on the bench, Tara opened her palm, the imprint of her wedding ring still visible. A faint, pale circle, cold to the touch, the last trace of a 19-year marriage. When the bus arrived, she stepped on without looking back. The window seat was wet, fog gathering on the glass. She wiped it with her sleeve, staring out as the house receded into the distance. A 2-story home with white paint and a wooden fence, where she once believed happiness had a shape. Now it was nothing but a shell of architecture, lifeless and cold. The bus rolled downhill, past rows of bare trees. Tara leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt unclaimed. No one is waiting. No one needs. No one remembers. And yet, inside her, something small like a fragile ember still burned. A lightness, almost guilty in its relief. Freedom. She stepped off into the soaked square when the bus reached the downtown terminal. The smell of coffee, exhaust, and voices blending was chaos, but it pulsed with life. She found a small inn near the harbor. The room was cheap, with a low ceiling, peeling walls, and a creaking bed. But to Tara, it felt strangely peaceful. She took her small notebook from her bag and set it on the table. On the first page, she wrote, "Day 1. No more silence. No one needs me. But I still have myself." Night came. Rain mingled with the distant sound of ship horns. She sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the black water. Each flicker felt like the heartbeat of a town so different from the house she had left behind. Down below, a young couple shared an umbrella, laughing. Her chest tightened, then softened. She didn't feel envy or bitterness, only the quiet memory of a time when she had laughed like that. She placed her hand over her heart. It was still beating. That was enough. The next morning, Tara went looking for work. She walked along the harbor, passing storefronts with hiring now signs. At a small diner called Harbor Diner, a young woman asked, "Do you have any experience?" "Not much," Tara said, "but I can do anything." And she was hired night shift, dishwashing, hourly pay. That first night, her hands blistered. The detergent burned her skin. Grease clung to her clothes. But she didn't complain. Every plate scrubbed clean, every glass stacked neatly, each was proof that she still existed. Returning to her room that night, she showered in cold water, sat on the bed, and smiled faintly. For the first time in months, she felt exhausted but light. Her own voice echoed in her mind, "If silence could kill me, work will bring me back to life." She folded her blanket and turned off the light. The rain kept falling outside, but now she no longer feared it. 3 days later, Neil realized Tara was gone. But there was no scene, no drama, no shouting, no tears. He found only the wedding ring on the kitchen table, beside a cold cup of coffee and a blank sheet of paper. He stood still for a long time, then left for work as if nothing had happened. Zinnia asked, "Where's Mom?" "She went somewhere," he replied. "She'll be back." But he knew she wouldn't. Tara, meanwhile, never looked back. She blended into the city's rhythm, the sound of cars, the scent of smoke, the steady pulse of rain. She got used to walking home at 1 in the morning, the soft twang of country music drifting from the diner's old radio. Sometimes she watched couples share meals and laughter, and felt calm. One night, when she returned to her room, she found a bowl of hot soup at her door. No note, no name. Mrs. Odalis Kemp, the landlady, stepped out from the room next door. "You're too thin," she said in a rough, warm voice. "I figured you hadn't eaten." Tara smiled. "Thank you." Odalis nodded. "Don't thank me. Eat up, then get some sleep. Seattle doesn't wait for anyone." That night, Tara sat on her bed, eating spoonfuls of soup, tears mixing with the ginger's heat. For the first time, she thought maybe God hadn't forgotten her completely. The next morning, she arrived early at work. Her manager said, "You're doing great. Not many last the night shift." She replied, "I'm used to silence." He didn't understand, just smiled. Time moved slowly, but steadily. She bought a few small things, a desk lamp, a plastic flower, and a mirror. Little by little, these details made the room less empty, just as warmth slowly returned to her soul. On the 17th night since she left, she lay in bed and opened her notebook. "I don't think he'll look for me. And maybe I don't want him to. His silence killed me once. This time, I want to live, even if the only sound I have is my own breathing." She closed the notebook and turned off the light. Outside, the rain blended with the distant echo of ship horns. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that she'd wake up, work, eat a simple breakfast, and watch the sunlight glint through a dusty window. And for Tara Jensen, it was a minor miracle of freedom. The first days in Seattle felt like a small test sent by God to see how much a person could endure. Tara Jensen had once lived in a house with polished wooden floors, fresh coffee every morning, and the soft hum of a heater. Now, she slept on a creaking bed, listened to mice in the walls, and wrapped herself in a blanket so thin the cold seeped straight through. And yet, strangely, she felt more alive than ever. Tara walked to Harbor Diner each evening, a 24-hour spot near the docks. Pale neon lights, the smell of fried oil, the clatter of spoons on steel pans, and the hum of old country songs. Her job was simple: washing dishes, wiping tables, and sometimes carrying trays. No one there knew she'd once been a respectable wife. She was just Tara, the quiet, hard-working night shift woman. The shift started at 8 and ended close to 2 in the morning. At first, her hands burned, nails chipped from detergent and grease, but she got used to it. Each clean plate and dry table was a small proof she still existed and mattered. Sometimes, she looked out through the diner's fogged window, watching ships leave the harbor, their headlights fading in the mist. And each time, she thought, I'm leaving the harbor too, just without a destination. One night, Claire, the young, blonde waitress who loved to sing, asked, How long have you been here? 3 weeks. Where'd you come from? Seattle. Then, why work nights? Most women your age don't choose this shift. Tara smiled, staring at the bubbling sink. Because in the daytime, there are too many voices. Claire paused, then laughed. That's a weird answer. But Tara knew if she told the truth, that she was escaping the silence of her own family, no one would understand. After every shift, Tara walked home. The streets were empty, the rain tapping on her coat, her heels echoing against the wet pavement. She glanced up at the glowing windows of houses where families slept. Part of her felt a pang of loneliness, but another part felt light. At least, no one had to pretend to be happy anymore. When she reached her door that Saturday night, a bowl of hot soup waited there. Steam curled upward, fragrant with ginger and cilantro, no note attached. She carried it inside, her eyes brimming. Then, Mrs. Odalis Kemp, the landlady, opened her door, half smiling. You were out late, she said. So I made something warm. Thank you, Tara murmured. Odalis crossed her arms. Don't mention it. In Seattle, the rain's colder than the people. Eat before it cools. Tara sat down and ate, spoonful by spoonful. The warmth spread through her chest, all the way to her heart. It had been so long since she'd felt kindness that asked for nothing in return. She looked at the soup, tears falling not from sadness, but from the fragile light she felt inside. That night, before sleeping, she wrote in her notebook, People can erase me from their lives, but no one can stop kindness from finding me. Morning at the harbor had its own scent, sea salt, ship smoke, and fried donuts. Tara loved that hour before the city fully woke, when the water reflected the pale blue of Seattle's dawn. After her night shift, she often sat by the docks, sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching the mist lift slowly. She'd never realized freedom could be this tiring, but it was a good kind of tired, because it belonged to her. Sometimes, Mrs. Odalis joined her, cigarette in hand, telling stories about her life. I've been divorced twice, she said once. Both men thought I'd beg them to come back. I just told them, I'm not dead, I just changed houses. Tara laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in months. I don't know if I could ever be that brave, she said. Odalis shrugged. No one's born brave. We just decided not to carry the same pain anymore. Those words stayed with Tara. She began to notice the ordinary sounds of life again, the wind, voices calling out, dishes clinking, the hum of the dishwasher. They weren't heavy anymore. They were human. One day, Liv Thorne, the owner of a small cafe near her lodging, stopped by Harbor Diner. She asked, Would you like to help in the mornings at my cafe? I need someone to wipe counters and clean tables. Tara hesitated. You're already working nights here, Liv said. Won't you be too tired? Tara smiled. I'm tired of silence. Work isn't as hard as loneliness. And so, she started at Liv's place, where sunlight spilled through the windows each morning. She learned to make cappuccinos, polish wooden tables, and say, Have a good day to customers. At first, her voice was rough and quiet, but gradually, it grew warmer, steadier. Some afternoons, she and Liv sat outside, listening to jazz and watching the rain. Liv once asked, Have you ever been truly loved? Tara was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Yes, but he never realized I had a heart, too. Liv smiled sadly. Then maybe now, you should love yourself. The other one's probably forgotten. That night, Tara stood before her mirror. Her face was lined, her eyes tired, but for the first time, she looked at herself with gentleness. She applied a little lotion, something she once thought frivolous. Then she played an old song Neil used to hate, letting it fill the room. Music blended with rain, with her quiet heart a soft prelude to another kind of life. And Tara smiled, truly smiled for the first time. A smile not for anyone else, but for herself. She thought, maybe freedom doesn't come from leaving, but daring to live differently. The next morning, as she stepped outside, Mrs. O'Dallis called after her. "You look different today, Tara. You know that?" "How so?" "Like someone who's starting to believe she deserves peace." Tara just smiled. The Seattle rain still fell, but it no longer felt cold. Time passed. The Seattle rain still came, steady as ever, but Tara Jensen no longer counted the days. She no longer measured life by survival. She had begun to live within it. After more than 6 months working at Harbor Diner and Liv's Cafe, Tara had saved a modest sum. Not much, but enough to let her hold her head high when she paid the rent. Mrs. O'Dallis looked at her, smiling. "You know, Tara, you remind me of myself at 40, starting over with only 2 hands and a handful of broken faith." Tara smiled softly. "Were you scared back then?" "Of course. But I learned something. Fear doesn't kill you. It just slows you down." Those words eased something deep in Tara. She no longer saw herself as a failure, but as someone learning to walk again after falling. One Monday morning, while Tara was wiping tables at the cafe, Liv Thorne rested a hand on her shoulder. "Tara, O'Dallis asked me to pass something along. She's moving to Florida to live with her daughter. Her little house in Edmonds, she wants to sell it, cheap, for someone she trusts." Tara looked up, light flickering in her eyes. "A little house with a garden?" "Yes, small, but the sunlight there is beautiful." That evening, Tara took the bus to Edmonds. When she stepped off, the sky had cleared for the first time in weeks. Spring sunlight glowed over damp trees, and sparrows perched on power lines. The house O'Dallis had mentioned stood at the end of a slight slope, pale yellow walls, old shingled roof, a low wooden fence, and a small wild garden. Tara stood for a long moment, heart trembling as if she were standing before something sacred. It was a modest, aging house, yet it was a beginning in her eyes. O'Dallis opened the door, smiling half kind, half stern. "I can't take care of it anymore. If you want it, move in. Pay me whatever feels fair." Tara squeezed her hand. "Are you sure?" "Completely. Someone once helped me. Now it's my turn." "But remember," she said, locking eyes with her, "don't live here just to hide. Live to live, Tara." Tara nodded, tears already falling before she noticed. A week later, she moved in carrying a few bags, her small notebook, and the old desk lamp. That first night, she sat in the living room, the warm light glowing against the walls, insects whispering outside. For the first time in years, the silence didn't punish her. It simply rested beside her, gentle, calm. The next morning, Tara walked through the yard. The ground was overgrown, dotted with wilted flower beds. She picked up a shovel and began to clear it. Each thrust of earth felt like drawing breath again. When she uncovered a patch of clean soil, a name surfaced in her mind: Zinnia. She didn't know why, but she went to a garden shop nearby and bought packets of zinnia seeds. She planted them in the soft sunlight, dirt clinging to her hands, a small smile on her lips. "For myself," she whispered, "not for her." That afternoon, Liv came by with pastries and coffee. They sat on the porch, looking at the freshly turned soil. "What are you planting there?" Liv asked. "Flowers. The kind named after someone who once hurt me but now only makes me smile." Liv laughed, sipping her coffee. "That means you're forgiving." "No," Tara said slowly. "It just means I've stopped hating." A breeze carried the scent of new earth alive, honest. Tara closed her eyes, feeling the sun warm her skin. For the first time, she felt she belonged somewhere. Weeks later, the first green shoots appeared. Tiny, trembling stems, fragile in the wind but reaching upward anyway. Tara bent down, touched a leaf, and smiled. "Everything begins this small," she whispered. She watered the plants in the mornings, and the music played softly on a small radio. In the afternoons, she worked at Liv's place. Her days were quiet, simple but full of presence. Sometimes her new neighbor, Mrs. Agnes, a widowed woman, stopped by with fresh-baked bread. "You remind me of my daughter," she said. She loved flowers too, before she moved away. Tara smiled, accepted the bread, and invited her in for tea. She was learning to let people enter her world, even for a few minutes. On rainy days, she still sat by the window, listening to drops patter on the roof. But instead of feeling lost, she felt at peace. Silence was no longer a prison, it was a companion. Each night, she wrote a few lines in her notebook. Today, the zinnias sprouted 2 new buds. I think I'm growing too. One afternoon, Liv took Tara to a thrift shop. You need something to decorate your place, she said. You can't live surrounded by blank walls. Tara picked out a wooden frame. Inside, instead of a photo, she placed a handwritten quote, "To exist beautifully is the best revenge." That frame sat on her desk, facing the window. The sunlight caught the words each morning, making them glow like a quiet promise. Summer came. The zinnias bloomed bright and bold, red, pink, orange, yellow. Tara sat in the garden, tea in hand, watching the petals tremble in the breeze. At that moment, she didn't think of Neil Zinnia or the long days of silence. She only thought, I came back in my own way. That evening, she lit a small lamp and played soft jazz. The sound of insects hummed outside. She whispered to herself, I don't need to be loved to feel worthy. I need to love this life, even if it promises nothing. The wind drifted through the window, carrying the scent of zinnias into the room. Tara leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, but not from sadness. It was gratitude, pure and simple, for the fact that she had survived. 5 years passed. Seattle's seasons never changed in ways one could easily name. The rain still came, but there was more sun now, and Tara Jensen was no longer the woman of silence she once had been. She lived in her small Edmonds house with her garden, a stray cat named Whiskey, and a steady job at Liv's Place Cafe. Each morning, she rose early, brewed her coffee, listened to the radio, and watered her flowers. The zinnias had spread across the little yard, vivid and calm, like life's quiet apology. Tara had once believed she would live the rest of her days like this, not too happy, not too sad, just steady enough to feel whole again. Until that afternoon, it was one of those rare sunny days in Seattle. Pale light slipped through the window, landing on the wooden table, on the blooming pots by the sill. Tara was steeping tea when the phone rang. A strange number. She almost ignored it, but her hand paused halfway. Hello? She said softly, steady. A brief silence. Then, a low, rough voice. Tara, it's me, Neil. Her hand froze. That sound, once the most familiar in her life, returned now like an echo from another world, tightening her chest. Neil, she breathed. Why are you calling me? There was a slow exhale on the other end. It's about Zinnia. She's getting married. She wants you to come. Tara said nothing. The clock ticked. A drop of tea spilled, catching the light as it fell. Will you listen for a moment? Neil asked. I'm listening. She said she can't get married without you there, that it wouldn't feel complete. Tara gave a quiet, almost amused laugh. Really, Neil? For 5 years you and she have been perfectly complete without me. Why do I need you now? Silence. She could hear him breathing heavy, hesitant, as if trying to swallow words he'd carried too long. I'm sorry, Tara, he said at last. There were things I didn't know how to face. But Zinnia, she's grown. She regrets it. Regret isn't a ticket back to the past. I know. Another pause, long, waited. Then, softly, but if you don't come, she won't forgive herself. Tara gripped the phone tighter. The words trembled inside her, not because of Neil, but because of her daughter. She looked out the window. The zinnias swayed in the breeze. She had tended them for 5 years, though the name had once cut deep. And now, the person who bore that name was why she had to choose return or not. I'll think about it, she said quietly. I understand. Either way. Thank you, Tara. The line went dead. Only the sound of the wind filled the room. Tara stood still, staring at the phone on the table. Her world had fallen silent again. But this silence was different. This time, she was the one who could choose to speak. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching raindrops scatter across the garden. The zinnias held their heads high, as if nothing could make them bow. She wondered, was she that strong, too? The next morning, Liv stopped by, bringing waffles and her usual warmth. You look tired, Tara. Dreaming of someone again? Tara chuckled. No dreams. Just thinking. About what? Tara hesitated, then told her. Liv listened quietly. When Tara finished, she placed a hand on her shoulder. "Zinnia's your daughter," she said softly. "Whether you go or not, you'll still think of her." Tara looked down at her teacup, steam curling like a thin cloud. "Liv, do you believe people can change?" Liv took a sip of coffee. "Not entirely, but I believe people can realize when they've been wrong. What they do with that realization, that's what matters." The words stayed with Tara all day. That afternoon, she went into the garden, pruning the flowers, her mind tangled in memory. She remembered 17-year-old Zinnia bright, laughing, spinning through the kitchen as her mother cooked, and she remembered her daughter's cold eyes in those long, silent days. Tara understood then. She didn't hate Zinnia. She hated that she herself had stayed silent for so long. That night, she opened her old notebook. The last entry was dated 3 years ago. "If they need me again one day, will I be calm enough to return?" She smiled faintly and wrote beneath it, "I don't need to return to be seen. I need them to know I'm still here and I've lived well." 3 days later, the phone rang again. This time, Tara answered quickly. A young woman's voice, shaky, breaking, spoke. "Mom, it's me. It's Zinnia." Tara froze. Her throat went dry. "Are you well, sweetheart?" "I'm getting married." "Mom, that's good. I'm happy for you." The voice cracked. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I know I hurt you, but please come. I need you there. Even if you sit far away or don't speak, please." Tears welled in Tara's eyes, but her voice stayed calm. "My dear, forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. I'll think about it. I promise." After hanging up, she sat still for a long while. The rain had stopped. Moonlight poured through the window. On the table, the wooden frame with its familiar words glowed softly. "To exist beautifully is the best revenge." Tara stood and walked out into the garden. The night wind lifted her hair. The zinnias swayed gently, as if nodding. "All right," she whispered to the flowers or herself. "I'll go, but not to return. To close the circle." She went back inside and opened a small wooden box in her drawer. Inside was a photo of 3 people: herself, Neil, and Zinnia, taken on their first trip to Oregon years ago. Tara gazed at it for a long moment, then placed it in her suitcase. For the first time in 5 years, she packed a bag again. But unlike before, this time, she was the one choosing to leave, not the one being left behind. That morning, Seattle did not rain. The sky was startlingly clear, as if the heavens knew something important would happen. Tara Jensen stood before the mirror. Silver threaded softly through her hair, but her eyes were calmer than ever. On the chair lay a wine-colored dress, deep, warm, and steady. She touched the smooth fabric and smiled. This wasn't the color of sorrow. It was the color of survival. She put on light makeup and brushed a hint of lipstick, not to dazzle but to be present. Before leaving, she stepped into the garden. The zinnias swayed gently in the morning light. "Stay right here," she whispered. "When I return, I'll tell you everything about today." A taxi pulled up. The young driver opened the door, smiling. "Where to, ma'am?" "Grandview Estate." "Oh, that's a fancy wedding place. Are you a guest of the bride or groom?" Tara looked out the window, her voice quiet. "Both." The drive from Edmonds took more than an hour. The sky was pale blue, the clouds drifting slowly and softly. Along the way, Tara closed her eyes and took a deep breath, not to calm herself, but to remind her heart. She would not reclaim the past, only to close it. When the car stopped before the gates of Grandview, the sight before her made her chest tighten slightly. Rows of trees wrapped in white ribbons, balloons, and fresh flowers. Servers in black and white. The faint sound of a piano floating from the garden. She stepped out. The hem of her dress brushed the ground, catching the sunlight like a muted flame. No one noticed her at first. Guests were busy laughing, taking pictures. She walked slowly through the crowd, her eyes steady. And then Neil appeared. He was speaking with a group, champagne glass in hand, still polished and confident as ever, until he saw her. Their eyes met. 1 second. 2. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the stone floor. The sound rippled through the courtyard, pulling every gaze toward them. Tara stood still. She did not smile. She did not frown. She was Upright, silent, alive. Neil froze, his face pale. "Tara," he stammered. She tilted her head slightly. "You invited me, didn't you?" "I'm here." The air thickened. A murmur rippled through the guests. Some recognized her face, the woman who had vanished 5 years ago without a word. Tara looked around the white roses, the perfect stage, the soft music, the gleaming faces. Everything flawless, everything fragile. Neil moved closer, voice trembling. "I didn't think you'd actually come." Tara smiled faintly. "Because you didn't think I could face the past, right?" "No, I just thought you wouldn't want to." "You were wrong. I don't want to, but I need to." A woman approached Embel Lund, Neil's former colleague. "My God, Tara Jensen, I thought you'd moved far away." Tara nodded gently. "Seattle's small, Embel. You can still hear your heart, no matter how far you go." Then the music changed. The wedding coordinator called out, "Please take your seats. The bride is ready to walk down the aisle." Tara turned. She couldn't name what she felt. Not nervousness, not pain, just an almost sacred stillness. She sat at the back, where golden light fell across the flowers. When the piano began, everyone rose, and Zinnia appeared. The bride in white, a veil draped softly over her shoulders, her arm hooked in her father's. Tara held her breath. Zinnia was still beautiful, perhaps even more radiant, but in her eyes was something achingly familiar, a quiet weariness, once Tara's own. Step by step, Zinnia walked forward. Then, halfway down the aisle, her gaze lifted and found her mother. Light streamed through the tall windows, spilling onto the red carpet. Zinnia stopped. She couldn't move. The music played on, but the room began to feel the stillness. Neil whispered, "Go on, sweetheart." Zinnia's lips trembled. "Mom." The entire hall seemed to stop breathing. Tara stayed seated, eyes shining but calm, a small smile forming through her tears. Zinnia stared for a long moment, then forced a smile and kept walking, but tears fell freely down her cheeks. The bride walked down the aisle crying, and people bowed their heads. Neil stood stiff, his hand trembling. As the ceremony went on, the vows blurred into distant sound. Tara didn't hear the words. She only watched her daughter, her mind awash with memory. A summer afternoon when 10-year-old Zinnia helped her bake cookies, the off-key song she used to sing in the kitchen, the last night, day 31, when the girl had walked past her without a word. Each memory fell like shards of glass, but instead of cutting, they landed and dissolved. Zinnia looked around the crowd when the vows ended and the applause rose. Her eyes searched, then stopped at the back row. Tara was still there, silent, steady, unflinching. Zinnia's voice broke the room, soft but clear. "Mom." Everything fell silent. Neil turned, stunned. Tara stood slowly, her gaze tender but firm. "You've grown, Zinnia," she said. "I'm happy you've found your joy." Her voice did not shake. There was no anger, no grief, only the calm of someone who had survived the storm and learned to walk in peace. Zinnia's tears flowed harder. "Mum, I'm sorry." Tara shook her head. "No, my dear, not today. This is your day." The quiet deepened. A few guests began to cry. Embel whispered behind her hand, "She doesn't need to say much. Her being here says everything." Zinnia bit her lip and turned back toward the altar, but her face was wet with tears. The ceremony ended. Applause echoed, but no one truly smiled, because the real story between them lingered in the air, tender and unfinished. Tara slipped out before the reception began. Neil followed, calling softly, "Tara, wait." She stopped and turned. "Do you see?" she said quietly. "All it took was my presence, and everything you tried to bury came to light." I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing, Neil. Sometimes silence is the kindest thing left." She walked away. The late sunlight brushed her hair, turning it to copper. Each step she took left no sound, only a stillness that carried weight. As she reached the door, a breeze lifted her wine-red dress. People turned, watching, no one daring to speak, because everyone understood. Some people only need to return once, for the whole world to bow its head. That afternoon, Seattle's sunlight was gentle and strangely beautiful. On Lake Washington, the water shimmered with gold. Inside Grandview Estate, the wedding continued. Music, laughter, toasts, each sound trying and failing to erase the stillness left behind by Tara Jensen's arrival. But some things, once they appear, can never disappear again. Zinnia Jensen sat at the table, her fingers tight around her wineglass, her heart trembling. She felt suddenly like the 17-year-old girl she once was, watching her mother through the kitchen window as Tara quietly cooked, while she and her father refused to speak. The memory rose so vividly that she could almost smell the food and hear the oil sizzle. Casper, her new husband, leaned closer. "You okay?" Zinnia pressed her lips together and nodded, not meeting his eyes. Neil stood across the room, still pale, still shaken. He had never truly believed Tara would come, and he certainly hadn't expected that one glance from her could unravel the illusion of peace he had built for 5 years. The band began to play again. The host announced, "The bride and groom will now share their first dance." Casper reached for her hand, but Zinnia didn't move. "What's wrong?" "I need to see my mother." "Now?" he whispered. "Now." She set down her glass, the white hem of her gown brushing the carpet as she walked briskly toward the door. The room murmured in confusion. Neil called after her, "Zinnia!" She didn't stop. Tara had just reached the front gate when she heard the voice. "Mum." She turned. The sight pierced straight through her. Her daughter was running toward her, the same stride and desperate reach, as if she were still the little girl who once ran into her arms after every fall. Zinnia stopped, breathless, eyes wet. "Mom, are you leaving?" Tara looked at her, sunlight turning her daughter's face gold, beautiful, fragile. "I thought you didn't need me here." "No, Mom. I do." "Do? For what, Zinnia? I don't belong in your story anymore." Zinnia bit her lip, her voice trembling. "Mom, I can't go through with the ceremony until I say this." Tara said nothing, but she didn't stop her. Zinnia wiped her tears and turned back toward the hall. Confused, the guests were still standing when she walked up to the stage, lifted the microphone, and spoke. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone. But I can't continue until I say something." The room went silent. Neil stepped forward, but Zinnia raised her hand to stop him. She drew a shaky breath and spoke, clear and steady. "This is my mother, Tara Jensen. For 5 years I pretended she didn't exist." A wave of whispers spread through the hall. Casper stood frozen beside her. Zinnia went on, her voice trembling but resolute. "When I was 18, my father and I punished my mother with silence. 31 days, no words, no eye contact. We made her feel like she didn't exist, and then she left." Neil's face drained of color. "Zinnia, don't." But she didn't stop. "We called it space, but it was a sentence. We killed someone with our silence." The entire room fell still. Zinnia's voice broke, and 5 years later, she came here at my wedding, still calm, still standing. She didn't blame me. She didn't hate me. She just looked at me, and in that silence, I finally understood everything. She turned toward her mother. "Mom, I'm sorry, not because I'm afraid of losing you, but because I realized I became my father." Neil's hands gripped the edge of a chair, eyes shut tight. Tara didn't move forward. She knew this was a confession her daughter needed to walk through alone. Zinnia's voice wavered but grew firm. "I can't say I do today, not while the woman I erased is standing here. I can't begin a marriage built on a sin I haven't faced." Casper stepped forward, gently taking her hand. "You don't have to be perfect, Zinnia," he said softly. "You just have to be real." She nodded, tears spilling onto her dress. Neil spoke, his voice hoarse. "Zinnia, that's enough. No one needs to hear our private pain." She turned to him, eyes fierce through tears. "No, Dad, they do. They need to understand that sometimes the cruelest thing isn't shouting, it's choosing to be silent." She looked around the room, then set the microphone down. "I just wanted my mother to hear this. Here, in the light, where no one can pretend anymore. Mom, I'm sorry, I was wrong." Her voice cracked on the last word. The hall was utterly silent. No one dared move. Tara began to walk forward, slowly, each step echoing through the stillness. She stopped just short of her daughter, looking at her not with anger or pity, but with the calm of someone who had lived through pain and found her peace. "Good," Tara said quietly. "I waited for you to say this. Not so I could forgive you, but so you could forgive yourself." She reached out and brushed a hand over Zinnia's hair. Zinnia broke down, sobbing. No one knew what to do. Only the sound of her crying filled the hall, soft and raw. Neil bowed his head, shoulders shaking. Embelund wiped her eyes and whispered, "This isn't a wedding anymore. It's a prayer." Tara pulled her daughter close, held her tightly, then stepped back and smiled. "Go on, sweetheart. Live, love, and never again be silent like that with anyone." Zinnia nodded, tears glistening on her cheeks. She knew, in that moment, she had been born anew. The hall remained silent still, but this time it was not the silence of denial. It was the silence of reverence. No one left the hall after Zinnia finished speaking. No one needed to be told. Everyone stood still, beneath the white lights, amid the scent of flowers and the hush of wind. The air felt sacred, so still that even breathing seemed loud. Tara remained beside her daughter, her wine-red dress glowing softly under the light. She did not cry, did not tremble. Her eyes found Neil, the man who had once been the center of her world, standing in the front row, his hands shaking, gaze fixed on the floor. A man who once commanded everything with a look now could not meet the eyes of the woman he had silenced. Tara stepped forward, slowly, not to humiliate, but because truth should only be spoken when someone is ready to hear it. "Neil," she said quietly. He lifted his head. She saw fear in his eyes for the first time in years. "Do you have anything to say?" she asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though air had turned heavy. I don't know where to start." "Start," she said calmly, "from where you ended me." He stood frozen, lips trembling. "I never meant for it to go that far. When you stopped talking, I thought you understood. That silence was a way to keep the peace." Tara's smile was small and cold. "Keep the peace by killing another person's voice? Neil, you lived too long in a world where only your words mattered." Neil shut his eyes, tears slipping from the corners. "I know, I was wrong. I thought if I stayed quiet, you'd realize your mistake." "And what was my mistake, Neil?" He said nothing. Her question hung in the air, echoing through the room. No one answered because they all knew. There had never been a mistake, only the cruelty of a man who didn't know how to love right. Neil's knees buckled. The dull thud of him hitting the floor echoed against the marble. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Tara, I'm sorry. I was a coward. I didn't dare to admit that I was terrified of losing control, afraid of seeing you stronger than me. And when you went quiet, I chose to be more peaceful. I thought I'd won, but I was the only one who lost." Tara's eyes blurred, but her voice stayed even. "No, Neil, we both lost. The difference is, I learned how to stand again. You're still kneeling." He broke down, the sound raw, unguarded. "I destroyed you, Tara. I turned our home into a tomb. I didn't see that every day of silence was another stone burying your heart." I looked up, eyes red, pleading, "Can you ever forgive me?" Tara didn't answer at once. She stepped closer, voice low and steady. "Forgiveness isn't a gift you get to ask for. It's something I give to myself. You don't need my forgiveness, Neil. You need to learn how to forgive yourself." He bowed his head. In the soft white light, the once commanding man looked small, unraveled. Tara turned to the crowd, their tearful, motionless faces. "No one here is perfect," she said, "but when we choose silence to cause pain, it stops being pride, it becomes cruelty." Her tone deepened. "Don't ever do that to the people you love, because one day, when they truly fall silent, there will be nothing left to hold on to." No one spoke. Someone from the band quietly wiped away a tear. Casper the groom stepped forward, took Tara's hand, and said softly, "Thank you. You taught me something I'll never forget." Tara smiled. "Keep that close, young man. It might save your marriage someday." When the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Tara sat alone in the hallway overlooking the lake. The air was cool, tinged with the faint sweetness of wedding flowers. She heard footsteps behind her. Zinnia, still in her white gown, eyes swollen but clear. "Mom," she said hoarsely, "I don't know how to thank you." Tara placed her hand over hers. "No need for thanks. Just live truthfully, that's enough. I'm afraid, Zinnia whispered. Afraid you'll never speak to me again. Tara shook her head gently, tightening her grip. I was silent for too long, Zinnia. Now I choose to speak, live, and love, even those who may not deserve it. I won't make that mistake again. They sat together for a long time. The water lapped softly against the shore. Moonlight scattered across the lake like shards of glass. Mom, Zinnia asked, do you ever regret leaving? Tara smiled. No. If I hadn't left, I would have died inside that silence. And if I hadn't come back to life, I wouldn't be here, looking at you now. Zinnia began to cry again, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. I love you, Mom. I know, Tara murmured, her voice trembling, but it's still beautiful to hear. From the shadows, Neil stood watching. He didn't move closer. His hands were clenched, his eyes hollow. Perhaps, for the first time, he understood that some things, no matter how deeply you wish for them, can never be touched again. When the two women rose to leave, Tara paused, turned toward him, and spoke quietly, just for him to hear. Don't pray to be forgiven. Pray to understand, because when you understand, forgiveness will follow on its own. Neil bowed his head. Tara walked on. The lights glowed against her wine-red dress along the stone path, reflecting like a blend of blood and sunrise. Zinnia held her mother's hand. Will you stay in Seattle, Mom? For a while, maybe. My flowers are blooming, I can't leave them yet. Can I come visit? Tara squeezed her hand and smiled. The door's always open, my dear. As long as you walk in with truth. They passed through the long hallway. Behind them, the hall glittered. The music played, but it all belonged to another world. The world that once erased Tara Jensen now existed only in memory. At the steps outside, Tara looked up. The Seattle night was full of stars. She took a long breath and whispered, Forgiveness isn't for those who deserve it. It's for me because I deserve peace. Zinnia said nothing. She leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. They stood there, beneath the quiet sky. A chapter had closed, and for the first time, silence was no longer something to fear. That night, after every guest had gone, Grandview Estate was left in a dim wash of white light and the whisper of wind moving through the hallways. The wedding flowers were already wilting in the cold air. Tables stood unevenly, wine spilled across linen like the remnants of something once celebratory but now broken. Neil Jensen sat alone in the front row, the same place where, hours earlier, he had watched Tara stand and speak of silence. The wine glass in his hand had long gone flat. He didn't drink. The reflection of the chandelier shimmered in his eyes, hollow, vacant. Everything he had once been proud of, status, career, family, the polished image of a successful man, was now nothing more than an empty shell. Tara hadn't needed to humiliate him or raise her voice. She had merely stood there, and every lie he had built fell quietly apart, like dust. Neil laughed softly, the thin, bitter laugh of a man who realizes he has lost the most precious thing in life, without ever understanding it. He bowed his head, burying his face in his hands. It wasn't guilt he felt, it was the sensation of watching his soul fracture. In his mind, he heard her voice again. Don't pray to be forgiven. Pray to understand. But he didn't understand. He couldn't fathom how a woman could endure so much, and still stand tall. Still look at him with a calmness that cut deeper than anger. The back door creaked open. Ember Lund stepped inside, her heels tapping softly on the marble. She was no longer the confident, sharp-tongued colleague she once was. Now she looked like someone who had witnessed the fall of pride itself. Are you all right, Neil? He looked up, eyes blank. No, but I deserve this. She sat beside him, poured a little wine into his empty glass, and slid it toward him. She's strong, Emble said quietly. Neil's voice rasped. She used to be weaker than me. I used that to control her. I told myself I was protecting her, but I just needed her small to feel big. Emble stared into the emptiness ahead. Well, she isn't small anymore. Neil nodded, tears falling freely. She's taller than me now, Emble. She doesn't have to shout. She stands there, and I have to bow my head. He dropped the glass and buried his face in his arms. His shoulders shook. No one came to comfort him, because there is no comfort for a man watching the ruin of the self he once worshipped. Emble rose, looked at him for a long moment, and said softly, You know, Neil, I used to envy Tara. for being gentle, patient, soft, the kind of woman every man claims to want. But now I understand. Gentle people aren't weak. They choose not to use their strength for vengeance. And when they choose to walk away, no one can make them stay. She left, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Neil remained. An hour passed, then another, and finally, he sank to his knees. No one saw. Only the wind and the fallen petals gathered around him. He didn't kneel for forgiveness. He knelt because, for the first time, he saw himself clearly, the man who had killed love with silence. The next morning, Seattle's sky was a soft, grey hush. Tara returned home, brewed coffee, and opened her window. The chill air carried the faint scent of last night's rain. Her zinnias stood tall in the garden, bright, defiant, untouched by the storms. She smiled. "Well done," she whispered. "Stay that way." Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Neil. Only 4 words. "I'm sorry, Tara." She stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Not out of anger, but because some words come too late to matter. Tara poured another cup and stepped onto the porch. Whiskey, her old grey cat, leapt into her lap, purring softly. Sunlight glinted across the wooden frame hanging on the wall. To exist beautifully is the best revenge. She smiled. Yes. And the most beautiful existence is the one that no longer needs to be seen. Moments later, a car pulled up outside. Zinnia stepped out, wrapped in a long coat, holding a small bouquet. "Mom, Liv sent you some bread," she said. "You came alone?" "Casper's parking the car. He told me to go in first." Tara led her inside and poured tea. They sat on the porch for a while, silent but easy. Then Zinnia asked softly, "Mom, how's Dad?" Tara gazed toward the horizon. "Learning to stand, maybe. But before a man can stand, he has to kneel." Zinnia lowered her eyes. "I'm afraid he's lonely. Sometimes loneliness is the punishment we need to understand." Zinnia nodded slowly. "You know, Mom," she whispered, "when I saw him kneel before you yesterday, he didn't look like my father anymore. He just looked like a man learning how to be human again." Tara took her daughter's hand. "And that's a lesson you'll never need to repeat. All you have to do is love and speak when it hurts." The wind stirred through the garden, shaking the leaves. A single zinnia petal drifted down into Tara's palm. She lifted it toward the light, fragile, proud. "Do you see, darling? See what, Mom? Even when it falls, it's still beautiful, because it doesn't fall in fear." Zinnia's eyes welled with tears. Tears not of pain, but release. They sat together a while longer. Then Zinnia stood and kissed her mother's cheek. "I'll go now. I'll call tonight." "Go on, and live truthfully," Tara said with a smile. Zinnia left. Tara watched her disappear down the road, her smile calm, content. When the car's sound faded, she turned back toward her garden. Seattle's rain had started again, soft, steady, neither sad nor sweet. She held out her hand, felt the cool drops sink into her skin. Eyes closed, she listened to the rain on the roof. She remembered it all: the 31st day, the ring left behind, the rented room, the bowl of soup, the first bloom, the phone call, the shattering glass in Neil's hand. Each memory passed slowly, quietly, until the film of her life settled on one image. A woman in a rain-soaked garden, a fallen petal resting in her palm, smiling. She had come full circle. No bitterness, no waiting, only peace. And Tara whispered to herself, like a lullaby to her own heart, "No one ever wins the war between love and pride. But the one who chooses to stop fighting is always the one who walks free." In the morning, Edmund smelled of damp earth and fresh coffee. The rain had passed, but mist clung to the leaves like a memory that refused to fade. Tara Jensen opened the door and stepped barefoot into her garden. The soil was calm, soft, alive beneath her feet. All around her, zinnias were in full bloom, red, pink, orange, yellow, bursting together like a living painting. She still couldn't believe that the tiny seeds she had once planted had become this radiant sea of color. "You've done well," she murmured, speaking to the flowers, but really, to herself. She poured her coffee and carried it to the porch. Whiskey, the old cat, curled up beside her chair. Tara sat down, watching the steam rise from her cup. Every morning was the same, yet each one made her quietly grateful. On the table lay Zinnia and Casper's wedding card. After the interrupted ceremony, they had married again, a small, tender gathering in a seaside chapel, no extravagant flowers, no grand chandeliers, just love that had learned to be honest. Inside the card, Zinnia had written, "Mom, I don't know if this is happiness or grace, but I know that without you, I wouldn't have learned what it means to love truly." Tara kept the card on her table, a soft period at the end of all her old pain. She didn't need anything else, no apologies, no recognition. It was enough to know she had lived meaningfully. She sipped her coffee, gazing at the sky as it slowly brightened. A car rolled to a stop outside the gate. It was Neil. He didn't come in. He just stood beyond the fence, looking at the garden full of zinnias. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then they both nodded once. A farewell without words. He had finally understood. It wasn't about reclaiming, but about leaving with dignity. The car moved away down the dirt road. Tara watched it go, not sad, not relieved, just still. She returned to her garden, picked up the shears, and began cutting flowers to place in a clear glass vase. Her hands were steady, the morning light glinting on her wrist, where the wedding ring had once left a faint mark, now smooth and unscarred. She looked down and smiled. There was no wound anymore, only healed skin and a heart that no longer needed to defend itself. She whispered, as softly as the breeze, "I survived, and I did not bow." That afternoon, Zinnia and Casper came by. Casper brought fresh bread. Zinnia held a bouquet of zinnias from their little garden. "Mom," Zinnia said, smiling gently, "I brought you flowers that share my name." Tara accepted them, inhaling their earthy sweetness. "They're beautiful," she said, "and different from mine. Yours smell like forgiveness." Zinnia's eyes glistened. "Mom, I remember the day you left. I thought you were weak, but now I understand. Walking away was the strongest thing you ever did." Tara squeezed her daughter's hand. "Not strong, sweetheart. I just didn't want to die in silence." The three of them sat together, listening to the faint sound of waves drifting from the bay. Casper put on some soft music. Tara looked at the young couple, Zinnia, resting her head on his shoulder, and felt her heart so full there was no room for regret. That evening, after they left, Tara stepped into her garden again. The moon hung high, silver light washing over everything. She carried a candle and placed it in the middle of the flowers, lighting it carefully. The flame flickered in the wind, illuminating her face. "Neil," she whispered, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I want peace in my heart." The breeze stirred. The flame wavered, then steadied. Tara watched it, eyes damp, but smiling. She returned to the porch, opened her old journal, and wrote the final lines. "The day I left, Seattle was raining. The day I came home to myself, the sky was full of stars." Happiness isn't having someone to walk beside you, it's knowing that even alone, you never fall. She closed the notebook, set it beside her cup of tea, and looked out at her garden. The zinnias swayed under the night wind, their petals reflecting the candle's soft glow. Tara leaned back in her chair, eyes closed. A smile, thin as thread, but radiant in the moonlight, crossed her lips. "Finally," she whispered, "I've learned to be silent without feeling alone, because in that silence, I can hear myself." Rain began to fall lightly, mingling with waves in the distance. Tara Jensen sat in her small house, surrounded by her garden, in the tender light of the candle. No one would ever know, but this moment was the most beautiful of her life. Not because of what had happened, but because, at last, every pain had found its meaning. Thank you for walking with me through the journey of the woman who walked away. We have watched Tara Jensen live, endure, leave, forgive, and finally, stand tall in the garden of her own making. Maybe each of us has been Tara once, forgotten, unseen, learning how to walk out of a place once called home. But the beauty lies not in her leaving, it lies in the fact that she never bowed to pain. If this story touched you, even a little, leave a thought, a feeling, a moment below. And don't forget to follow along for more stories, journeys of healing, where every wound finds a way to bloom. I'm Me Thor, your storyteller. Thank you for staying until the end. See you again in another story about love and the quiet courage to begin again.